One of the areas that came up on the break here between finishing the last presentation that I did for you on exemptions and then starting out in the new one is a question about mobile homes. You know, are mobile homes exempt? After all, some would say, well, mobile homes are just a trailer, you know. Now, let me say this to you. If you live in a mobile home, I started my life as an adult in a mobile home. I had a 10 by 50 mobile home. That's where I lived when I went to law school. That's how I paid my way through law school, as I lived in a mobile home. And then even after I was a lawyer for a year or two, I still lived in a mobile home until I could get on my feet and start investing in a home that I got through the VA, actually. So basically, you know, there's nothing to be ashamed of, but it is a question that comes up. The thing on the mobile home to understand is it can be at once considered to be personal property or real property. Now, you know, we can get into property a little bit if you need to. Real estate is attached to the ground. Okay, so your home built on a foundation. It's got pipes that go down in the ground. It's got electric wires that come up through the ground. And so basically a home is attached to the ground. Anything that's attached to your house, water heater, furnace, this is all considered part of the real estate. In fact, I've seen people end up going to jail because they got mad at the bank when they got foreclosed on, and they took the furnace and the water heater. I've seen them take all sorts of things, doors, windows, out of houses because they were mad at the bank because the bank wouldn't work with them to avoid foreclosure, and they ended up having to foreclose on them. So they sold the furnace, they sold the water heater. Well, really, that's theft. That is a crime. You're not allowed to do that. Everything that's attached to that house stays with the house. Okay, well, what about a mobile home then? Does that mobile home qualify as real estate? Well, it's kind of a strange bird in Indiana because it can qualify to some extent as real estate, and then on the other hand, it can qualify to some extent as personal property. If you look at it in terms of property taxes, it's like 50% of the standard rate for most real estate. So if the mobile home, and for example, let's say it has the wheels off and it has a foundation built under it, as far as cement block foundation that's attached to the ground, and then the mobile home is attached to the foundation, then very likely it could be considered to be real property. On the other hand, if it just has skirting on there, and if you take the skirting off and there's still wheels under there, that it could be pulled away, especially if the tongue is still on it. You know, these type things have a lot to do with the definition, you know, that what we're looking at here. Is it real estate? Is it personal property? And, you know, that can affect how you take your exemptions. I think most of the time people are going to be allowed to claim that mobile home as exempt, but that can be an issue depending on what district that you're in when you're filing these bankruptcies. So that's something that's going to take some individualized research. It varies from city to city, and so it's something that you want to look at carefully. Well, what we're going to do then is move on to the next topic. We've talked quite a bit about exemptions. Let's talk a little bit about liquidation. Now, what is liquidation? Okay, and then these are just some simple kind of explanations kind of to help you understand the material in your book, the material on your course, the material in your PowerPoints. All these things are available to you through Blackboard and through your textbook. But it's important that you understand that if you file for liquidation, which is Chapter 7, or if your case gets converted from a wage earner plan to a liquidation, there is a possibility that the trustee could liquidate, and that's who's basically responsible. Trustee steps forward and sells things, and then the money that they capture, they go toward paying off your debts based on a certain priority list that's set up by the trustee. So, there's a lot of different things that go into that priority list. Let's say, for example, let's say you owe employees wages. Let's say you had somebody working for you as your employee in your office, for example, and you owe them wages. Then you're in a situation where that would be paid right away. That'd be one of the first things that are paid. Secured property gets paid, or they get the property, whichever. Unsecured property down the line, credit cards, things like that, where there's no security on anything, then those are the ones that are left toward the end, and they are low on the totem pole in terms of liquidation, in terms of getting paid any kind of what we call a premium from the assets of the person who is being required to pay. There are some things that are not dischargeable, and those non-dischargeable debts, they still follow a debtor. Some examples might be, let's say somebody is involved in like a terrible accident and he's intoxicated. Well, he can file bankruptcy on a lot of things, but he cannot file if he's being sued for a tort for causing injury to another person while he's intoxicated. So these are the kind of things that could be litigated, and then again, they could get a premium, and they could still come back on the debtor later on because he harmed somebody. Other examples might be any kind of crimes. If a person commits some kind of a crime like theft, like rape, and you can go on and on, injury to another person, then they can still be subject to garnishment of their wages in the future, and they cannot get discharged for certain types of non-dischargeable debts. So liquidation needs to be applied by priorities to the most important things first, and then down the line to the less important. Non-secured credit card is like one of the lowest things on the list. Also personal loans. Somebody loans you $500 cash to help you file your bankruptcy. You promise, well, I'm going to pay that back. Well, you're not under any obligation to pay that back. I mean, there's nothing in writing, and so basically, based on the statute of frauds, chances are that person's going to be really low on the list. Another thing on liquidation we need to say is in terms of being paid out of a liquidation, you have to file a claim in the bankruptcy. Many times for years, I used to have people actually file bankruptcy on me that owed me, let's say, for a divorce or a DUI or something like that. Well, I would file a claim. I always file a claim. They'd even send me letters. Well, it's not necessary to file a claim yet. Well, I file a claim anyway, because you never know. Someone may have a tax return, for example, where they get a refund. Well, that refund is subject to liquidation. So these are the type of things that can come up. Someone might seem like a small, clear Chapter 7 liquidation, and there's nothing to liquidate. They're basically more or less like a turnip. You can't get blood out of a turnip, or a rock. You can't get blood out of a rock, the old saying says. So in like manner, there's a lot of people like that, but they may have overlooked, oh, I always get a tax refund. Now, I've seen people get a huge tax refund and just completely space that, forgot all about it. And so what ends up happening, the trustee can grab that tax refund and dole that out to all your creditors in those kind of cases. So it's very important when you're taking down the information, ask these kind of questions as a paralegal. Do you expect a tax refund? Very important. I mean, that could throw kink into all the works there. So that's something to consider. Okay, so basically we've talked a little bit about liquidation, and I'm going to move on to another topic here real quick. Well, I'm trying. It's the age-old thing, it's technology, folks. And so what we're going to do is just touch on Chapter 2 in your book a little bit. And so it's important to kind of understand, first of all, the organization of the bankruptcy code. It has different parts to it. Each part's important. Basic bankruptcy terms, we've been covering some of those, like creditor, debtor, and trustee. And then the two types of bankruptcy that we've already covered on, liquidations and reorganizations. Now, one of the things I want to touch on real quick is I've approached this so far pretty much as though we're looking at a consumer type bankruptcy. You know, that is the vast majority of all bankruptcies that most people will be working with in your lifetime. And that is the wage earner, guy makes maybe $1,000 a week, let's say, wife maybe makes $500 a week, part-time job, and they've got all these doctor bills, let's say, to pay. One of them gets really sick, and so something has to be done. Well, in those kind of cases, then you're looking primarily at Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. But there are other types of bankruptcies. There are special bankruptcies for banks. There's special bankruptcies for railroads. There's bankruptcies for cities, believe it or not. There's bankruptcies for farmers. And we will talk about bankruptcies for farmers later on in the class. Also out of that bankruptcy for farmers statute, there's also a section for fishermen. So we won't see much of that in Indiana, but that's just something to be aware of, that when you get into these different parts, you know, there's different kinds of bankruptcies that fit under certain statutes. The final one I would just want to mention to you is what we call a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is for large corporations like General Motors. We just experienced that. We saw where they filed bankruptcy. In my lifetime, if someone had told me early in my life, well, General Motors is going to file bankruptcy, I would have said, there is no way. I can't believe it. It's not going to happen. But it did. So circumstances change for all kinds of people, organizations, and that's why bankruptcy is necessary, to try to get things worked out, liquidated, or reorganized depending on the circumstances. So basically that's all we're going to cover at this point. When we come back again, we'll launch into Chapter 2 more heavily, and we'll deal with that a little bit more. Thanks a lot for watching. Again, if you run into problems or questions, robdaywaltme.com. Thank you.